welcome everybody to our national outreach call. We've been doing this every month for almost a year now, which is amazing. And it gets better each time, or we get better at it each time too. My name's Virginia Kotz. I'm the co-editor in chief at Real Progressives. And the main thing I want to tell you guys is that we have a question and answer section. And as our guests speak, if you think of any questions, add them there. At the end, we will definitely do a Q&A and perhaps add some questions throughout as well. So you can do two things. You can just write the question and have us ask it, or you can say that you want to ask a question and we'll unmute you and have you do it. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to our founder, Steve Grumbine.
All right. Hey, everybody. So this is a really fun time tonight. I want y'all to know, for those of you who listen to our podcast on the regular, and that's all of you, of course, right? The show I did with Ben and Scott a few weeks back was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, it was a huge paradigm shift. And I found myself, I had read before I got on the call. I was trying to be, Mr., on top of it. And there's a lot of interesting things that they presented regarding this thing called the uni. In other words, a university currency. And the intricacies of it seemed like it was almost just mind-blowing. And as they simplified it and they brought things into focus and so forth, I was having literal light bulb moments in the middle of the podcast, which, to be fair, doesn't happen that many times. I'm usually prepared. I know what's going on, but this particular one just opened the door to a lot of other questions that I had. So we thought it'd be a really good idea to kind of follow through with my lighting sucks, by the way, folks. It's because I'm in a COVID-19 world and we're going to have to get through it. But anyway, the idea here is that, when we did this podcast, I thought, why don't we keep some continuity here in the framework of this uni, because this is a here and now solution. It's a solution meant for the times. And so I want to just tell you a little bit about Scott and Ben from my vantage point. I'm not going to do a big bio. I'll let them give you their credentials. But from my vantage point, I've known Scott for a long time. I've known Scott through the Facebook world back when there was only like one small little chat group basically on Facebook where, we would go in there and we would talk. And, obviously I was 15th generation compared to these guys. These guys have been around for a long time. But Scott has always been one of the really, really good guys. He's always been the guy that's extended the love and really gave you good encouragement. And I just want to be fair. The guy has really bent over backwards to be an ally. And that means a lot. I mean, we work really hard around here and we don't get a lot of kudos. So when somebody respects you, it's just a really nice thing. And that, respect is reciprocated, by the way, Scott. You're just one of the greatest guys. And so, it was my pleasure to have you on. And when I talked to you, you said, I really think we ought to have Ben on. Ben, we can do this thing on the uni. And Ben's really been the one driving it. And I remember I actually moderated a panel. My first time meeting Ben was at the first Modern Monetary Theory conference out in Kansas City. And, I was actually the moderator for that. And it was just a really, really neat experience. And we talked afterwards. He was very, very nice, very affable. And I had been after him to interview him for a long time. And finally, we got him on the hook to do this interview with Scott. And so for me, these two guys are really nice. Don't read Ben's teaching, the kudos or lack. Man, they're like, he is the hardest teacher. But he's a brilliant guy. And I sat there and I read him. I was like, this guy is like the best. Anybody that really wants to know this stuff, he knows it inside and out. And I find to be one of the easiest, guys to learn from. When I've listened to him, I've listened to a bunch of different things that he's done. And, he's just one of those very unassuming, nice guys. And so we've got the blessing, if you will, of having two guys on here that really know their stuff. And so without further ado, I guess what I'll do is I'll start with you, Ben. Ben, introduce yourself like with your proper credentials, and then we'll go to Scott.
Sure. My name is Ben Wilson. I'm still technically assistant professor of economics at SUNY Cortland. My appointment to associate professor technically begins on September 1st, so I'm excited to update the business cards and move forward. But yeah, so that's my big credential. I'm also a dad and partner and sports fan. I grew up in Kansas City, so there's as soon as we moved away from Kansas City, great things started happening there with the World Series and then the Super Bowl last year. But my teaching informs my research, and my research informs my teaching, and I too am super glad that I got involved in that Facebook group many years ago, Critique After MMT with Scott, and ended up having him come visit and give a talk at Cortland. And that's how we started to get to know each other a long time ago. And his work reminds me a lot of my mentor and dissertation advisor, Matthew Forstater, and that he's always thinking very creatively and bringing in sources that you wouldn't think to bring into a conversation. And this working on the Uni project with him and the Max Seho and Billy Sass, and most recently with Jakob Weinig on the finalization of a grant proposal to finance the research spectrum of the Uni. But with any luck, we might be pushing this forward politically faster than it can get legs from a research perspective. So wow. I think with that, I'll turn it back to you, Steve.
All right, dude, I had no, just so you know, I was always the fringe guy begging people for attention when I was in those groups. So it's nice to have, I didn't know everybody, but I am glad I know you now. All right, Scott, you're up, brother.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having us. It's really great to be able to continue to talk about this idea. I think it's so important, and not just as a particular idea, but as a kind of, as I'm referring to it, a kind of problem space or thought space. It's a kind of a slightly different angle to take on MMT and to kind of make it sing in new ways, and especially during a crisis. I guess I should speak about my credentials. So I'm associate professor of humanities and cultural studies at the University of South Florida. I, along with Ben, he forgot to say this part, we're both research scholars at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity. I also help co-direct the Modern Money Network, and then specifically the Humanities Division in the Modern Money Network. And then I co-host and co-produce the podcast Money on the Left through that. And I think that's pretty good for credentials.
Okay. So let's just take a moment and you guys can, I love how we did it in the podcast. It really flowed organically. Ben, why don't we start with you kind of breaking down what the Uni is, and then we'll go from there. We'll just sort of riff off each other and let it go.
Sure. I think the best place to kind of start is with the question that you ask. And it was just very straightforward, simple question is this legal? And I think that question really, lit a fire under some new directions here that we've been thinking about how to frame the Uni and how to explain it in a more concrete way. But for the grant and for like kind of a simple writing, basically we are proposing that the universities implement the Uni, which we imagine as a scalable, reproducible, resilient virtual currency system that models macroeconomic structures, mobilizes public and environmental health resources, and enhances public policy development. And it's really that last part that your question has really begun to contribute to. So if we think of virtual currencies and advances in financial technology writ large, what the media calls fintech. The reason why it's so hard to answer whether or not this is legal or not is because that is such a transitioning and ever evolving space of both legislation and regulatory theory and ideas. And so one of the ways that we've begun to reframe the uni and thinking about it as this sort of reproducible, scalable, localized currency system that mimics both the banking sector in terms of an investment strategy and credit creation, with potential linkages to the Federal Reserve and its normal accommodation, monetization sort of framework, but also a local tax circuit, right, where universities don't pay property taxes because they are tax exempt as land grant institutions and for a variety of other reasons. So they could pay a substantial sum of liquidity to struggling local communities through the COVID pandemic as sort of an olive branch or an act of goodwill. And in return, the local municipality would spend those unis and accept unis back from the local community for their property tax bills as well, which, using the monetary circuit and the tax circuit in that way is pretty standard MMT. And in doing so, we're doing something that's a little bit unique. In the regulatory space, one of the things that is problematic is fintech in general, when you read the literature, it tends to reproduce the barter myth story over and over again. So one of the magical things that happens with financial technology is that it speeds up transactions, it reduces transactions cost, and it enhances and expands markets, right? Just like, voila, we spontaneously agree to use this new metal or what shell or whatever in the barter myth story. And so in doing so, the regulatory framework is really overemphasizing or looking really specifically at the transaction space. And not so much at the holistic systemic risk that speeding up these transactions creates. So, for example, Virginia Eubanks wrote a really great book called Automating Inequality, where she shows that artificial intelligence decisions and smart contracts, especially in terms of policing and things like welfare benefits, disproportionately impact people of color in a very negative way. Right? So there's unpredictable consequences based on these algorithm and technology and financial services sort of approaches to solving problems. And so really, I think what we're offering with the uni is a chance for regulators to model financial technology in broadly closed systems, but through open human economic behavior to develop new regulatory ideas and to test existing theoretical models. So for example, one of the models that is prominent in the fintech space is this idea of a regulatory sandbox, where the financial firm is relieved of state and federal laws in order to get this thing off the ground and figure out how it works, et cetera. And then you create the regulatory framework around how it behaves and what it does. And what we are proposing is that the uni, would act as this sort of model for, partners at the Federal Reserve who are calling and actively utilizing this sort of system now. They've been doing internal closed system experimentation of central bank digital currency issue with MIT. Of course, this is all modeling and computer-based and internal, but that sort of open source code sharing could be used for the uni to satisfy liquidity needs, and with the official stamp of the Federal Reserve as a monetary experiment, just as their liquidity facilities are experiments and liquidity provisioning and lending. We could directly send those balances to frontline community workers, restaurants, people that really need money now, and in that process, learn a lot about financial innovation, learn a lot about the macroeconomy, and really avoid kind of the systemic risk that's involved in sort of these larger experiments that the Fed is famous for unleashing on the population, especially during times of crisis.
Scott,
Yo.
where are we going from there, brother?
So, I'm the like rhetoric framing guy. So I'm gonna I want to draw out some of the. So what Ben did is he kind of gave a State of the Union, right? Like he did. Ben, you didn't give like a Uni 101. You gave a like this is where we are now, right? And I think it might be worth coming back and fleshing out some basics. But what I want to do now is just kind of do a little bit of big lessons that I think are packed into what Ben just said. I think one of the things that's very important for us about a politics and a strategy of university self-financing through a complementary currency that is anchored in tax circuits and hopefully Fed support is to make this an active solution and an active transformation rather than a more passive begging situation, a begging to be bailed out, of a horrible financial revenue constrained model that we've been in for decades and decades, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse, especially since the great financial crisis. So turning it from a passive, helpless begging to an active set of demands and policies is one thing. And then sort of, I think, related to this, that's very important for me, and I think our recent, and by our, I really mean, and Ben's been really kind of, his synapses have been firing on overdrive, and he's really been taking this in new, amazing directions, is the way that the uni reframes the crisis in public university finance, which includes, right, the crisis of university economies, right, which is not just about on campus, right? This is about all the small businesses and beyond, right? And even the big box stores that are around universities, right? Like we're talking about massive regional economies, right? So what the uni does is it takes that crisis and it offers a solution that is just a positive sum game every which way you look. So the proposal that we have that Ben was just discussing for local municipalities, cities, and counties to accept the uni in taxes, what that does is it makes the receivability of the uni much, much stronger and wider, right? Through the property tax. It also, through that, makes uni liquidity much more powerful for small businesses, right? So that's a win-win. And then we're saying that the university that's creating the uni credit should just start paying taxes to these municipalities that never saw these taxes before because of tax exemption rules. So it's a win, right? It's not just begging the city and the county, right, to make this tax receivable and take a political risk. It's no, if you take this political risk and you make this tax receivable, you're going to get a windfall of liquidity as a result. So that's a win-win there. And then it's even a win-win with the Federal Reserve that really desperately wants to get ahead of this fintech regulatory problem that they feel like they've been on their heels and kind of passively trying to like scramble to catch up. So they get the riches of data, right? And data analysis. So I think that's how I would sort of frame the big so what consequences of Ben's State of the Union address that he started us out with.
Okay, so let me bring you all back to the 099 portion of this for a moment. For those people who are maybe not fully familiar with what the concept of the uni even is,
right?
We have some, from my vantage point, when I heard about this, I just kept thinking, because I know that there is some laws on the books and stuff like that that kind of prevent certain things happening. Like Fadl, I'd spoken to Fadl Kaboub about a similar type of situation. And he had said one of the concerns was the issuing authority and how that would work and whether that would violate laws and so forth. And I was like, wow, okay. So he kind of tipped me off in a different direction. And so I had no idea what this uni thing was when that happened. Even after reading it, it kind of sent me in too many different directions. Because on one hand, I could see, okay, this is just a local school-based thing. It's like, no, it's not, Steve. It's bigger than that. Okay, so it's a local community thing. Well, no, it's even bigger than that, kind of. Oh, wow, okay. And it's got the Federal Reserve in there too. And wait, hold on. So go back a few minutes and give us the 099 class of what the uni is.
Well, okay, one thing I'd like to say is that this isn't 099, but your kind of experience of being sort of split between the, wait a minute, states and municipalities can't issue their own currency, that's against the law, right? Like that mode versus the, wait a minute, like what's all this like crazy innovative stuff you guys are talking about, right? And I think that's a function of kind of bringing like old school politics together with the reality of the present situation, which is defined by radical Fed experimentation in the face of a crisis, and but even before that, a increasing erosion of Federal Reserve ideology, right? And then even and alongside that is this disruptive, constantly innovative, and destabilizing fintech space, right? So nobody says, right? Nobody says to these fintech, entrepreneurs and, privateers, nobody says like, well, you can't issue your own currency. That's illegal, right? Nobody says that, right? And I think what the uni does is it brings those things together, right? They kind of occupy like these different streams of like history and politics. And if you actually think about them at the same time, then what counts as issuing your own currency, I think, kind of opens up to possibilities. We can still do the 099, but I think Ben wants to follow up.
Well, let me jump in, and I want to hear what Ben has to say, but let me jump in there real quick. I just had a very, very stealth interview, and I'll just let the cat out of the bag so the few people that we have can really get the word out. We just interviewed Brett Scott the other day as well.
Yeah.
And Brett's sort of been in hibernation mode writing a book. And so we were able to kind of pull him out. And so some of these thoughts went into the discussion that we had because it sort of brought in some more things. So we're trying to keep pulling and pulling and pulling more through. Anyway, go ahead. I'm Ben, take us the rest of the way to 099, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I lost a little bit of track with the change of gears there, but literally the uni started as a classroom currency experiment just to see, give students hands-on experience in the service learning sector and to think about how the tax circuit works, right? To understand that money is socially constructed and I can construct it in a class to achieve particular movements of resources and activities. And so from there, it developed into really how does this research project look over multiple semesters and time periods, and how do we begin to build capacity in our local service learning and social enterprise groups and spread it out over the farming sector and for local foods and sustainability. And I've always kind of thought of it as a way of, giving students the eye toward what jobs would look like during a Green New Deal. What does a Green New Deal look like? What do career paths and jobs and all of those sorts of things look like? And utilizing my position as a faculty member on a major anchor institution, right? The university is great because it employs lots of people in the same place year after year, brings in lots of dollars from outside the economy, it moves lots of resources, it owns lots of lands and all those sorts of things. So anchor institutions is kind of a proxy for fiscal power or banking power, I think is a nice model for helping students to understand the role of different structures in the economic system. And what I've been trying to do for a number of years now, and I had my first prototype of the uni as a digital currency ready last spring. And I was announcing it the day before we sent all our students home in the COVID-19 crisis to start using it. So we didn't get a chance to use it. Hopefully we'll figure out a way to implement a proxy of it here during this semester, even though many of them will be working remotely. But the idea of the digital system, I think, is an important step in the education process because, whether it's Tenino, Washington, or cities that are reaching out to them, or hundreds of different community and complementary currencies throughout the European Union, right? Money can and is always being innovated and changed. And what the uni really does by modeling this macro space is it allows the public to engage in the discussion about money, both in how it's being used and what has value and what resources they want to see activated, but also in the concept of its design, right? How do we structure this? How do we implement it? How, as it functions on my telephone or in my computer or wherever else, is it functional? Is it usable? Is it clean? Is it safe? Is my data being protected? Right? And the fintech angle, right? No greater instrument than what's the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin has opened the eyes of so many of my students. That's what they want to talk about all the time. It's opened the imagination to what money is and how it works and what are the important attributes of a currency system. And so the uni is really just that in a much larger scale, because really the Federal Reserve is asking those same questions, right? As they are moving toward a significant move towards the possibility of central bank issued digital currency, right? They need to know how this functions and how it operates, how the community will receive it and utilize it. Just like there was a lot of risk and uncertainty around the invention of the ATM, right? And the way that we moved to bank cards and almost completely using cards and never using cash and not writing checks. So these things are always happening and always taking place. But I think for the first time in history, right, we have the opportunity for the general public to be actively engaged in the design of the innovation and the movement of money into the future. One of the things that I was joking about this earlier before the start of this show, but Run the Jewels has a great new track out called Just Money. And one of the hooks is, look at all the slave masters printed on your dollar, right? Who do we want to print on the uni, right? Who is our representative, right? What images do we want to promote in our social promises to pay in terms of developing sustainability and moving toward a defund police sort of world? And that's the sort of thing that this is opening up, is just this complete new understanding and public discourse about what money is, how it operates, and what we want it to accomplish, rather than always having to seek out it in order to accomplish what we want to do.
No, that's powerful. That's powerful. Let me ask you, on the heels of that, if you were sitting in front of your classroom at SUNY, and you were telling them, hey guys, we're going to be doing this thing, what would be the steps that you would take to not only bringing about awareness of the situation, but then painting out maybe the problem statement that it's solving, and then how you would bring that to fruition? What would kind of step us through the birthing of this concept to the problem you seek to solve, and then how you implement it?
So it's a project. It's a project that takes multiple steps, but at the heart of the project is service and applied learning. So, similar to the Buckaroo at UMKC, which I unfortunately never got to use. In fact, Matt had to look around his office for a sustained amount of time before one finally emerged from one of the piles of books that he has everywhere in his office. But influenced by that and thinking about, this seems like the most reasonable way to teach people MMT, because learning by doing is so much more powerful than anything they can read in a text, or I can explain it 100 times in front of them in the classroom. But when they actually, have to earn one of these, a Benjamin, and I say that I need 10 of these back at the end of the semester in order for you to get your participation grade on this project. How did I create value for this, what was to you a worthless piece of paper before the class began? And this is, a standard MMT approach. Warren Loser's story of business cards is reminiscent of this. But what I've tried to do, instead of just having kids go out and willy-nilly pick volunteer activities, what I've really tried to do is structure this within the community so that the community social enterprises also get a feel for this. So I've got a number of community partners that I work with on a regular basis that understand the Uni project and are engaged in this as a broader research concept. And we've collaborated on the writing of a number of grants and sponsored programs to achieve particular objectives, all centered around a healthy, sustainable food system to address some serious problems in terms of food access and diet and health and all those sorts of things. And in Cortland County, New York, which is one of the poor counties in this state, devastated by Rust Belt transitions and, a new Walmart and all those sorts of things. So the students get, this hands-on experience. They get to think about the macroeconomy, and we talk about unemployment and inflation and all those sorts of things, but they also get to participate in grant-funded research. So thinking about what's the objective of the research? How do we measure whether or not we're achieving the objectives of the research, right? How do we evaluate those ways of thinking about the approach and what's the value of this, which is really a valuable skill and something that I think the innovators in the regulatory framework are beginning to ask these same questions, right? When you introduce your fintech, what is the economic purpose of this instrument, right? Who is it targeted to? Who is it going to circulate between? Who are the dealers and why do they value it? Why is this important? It also allows us to ask questions about institutional capacity, right? We are able to contribute, but could we do more, right? What are the limits to our ability to contribute to the development of a localized food system in Cortland, New York and beyond for the regional area, et cetera. And then, students also have the opportunity to pick their own individual sessions. So there's some of it is this directed grant research, but that's they sign into that. And if they can't fit that into their schedule, because I'm not that harsh of a dictator, right? They can do their own volunteering at the local soup kitchen, which is so wonderful and serves so many people with an open spirit and kind hearts. And it really makes a tremendous impact on our students to help others. And so they all write reflection pieces about how participating in these things change things that they came into the class thinking about how the world works and how it works now that they've had this experience. And it really changes their views on why people are poor and why people are suffering, and that might not be necessary. Often gets people a little bit fired up. So yeah, it's this macro theoretical thing that they get exposed to. It's the practical hands-on professional training of having to either go out and find their volunteer activity or engaging in a professionally articulated grant proposal and assessing and gathering data and making some charts and those sorts of things. And then it's also this kind of philosophical reflection sort of thing about what has value and why it has value, because none of these organizations that we work for and contribute to are seeking profits. So is what they're doing of value to the community? Is there more work to be done there? If there is more work to be done there, how much more work could be done? Why isn't there more work being done there? Talking about wage rates and why people get paid certain amounts of money and others more and these sorts of things. So it really becomes a catalyst for great discussions of political economy historically and for the future and so on and so forth. So that's basically how it works. And then at the end, there's a tax day, right, where everybody comes and they pay their taxes. And some students have a lot more Benjamins than they need to pay the tax, and others don't have enough. And then we open it up, usually a week before, so that students that don't have enough to pay the tax bill can, privately negotiate terms of trade. Whether it's future rides to the airport when the semester ends, or cleaning of kitchens, or, various, students are very honest, right? So there's illegal, illicit substances that are traded for Benjamins from time to time that they like to tell me about, which, more power to you for being honest.
Just give me some, right?
But what emerges there in that situation is that we've created a private sector through public spending. Right? They're trading private assets and negotiating and they've created a whole new economy that wasn't there before based on this tax circuit. And if I had taxed back all the money, then there wouldn't have been any private sector. And that would have been a bummer for those people that didn't do any of the work. Like, they would have just been left out. So that gets them to think about budgets and, kind of the current accounts and all those sorts of bigger questions
Sectoral
about
balances.
how much money should be in the economy and all that sort of stuff. So it's, it gets some laughs, and it loosens kids up to be touching, the paper and passing it around and doing all these things. But at the end of the day, more than any other way of teaching money, I feel like it sinks in those groups. So I always do it on my 105 class, so that when I have them again in 300, at my 300 level and 400 level classes, they're more familiar with it than they were before. And usually they can help teach others that didn't get to participate in the 105 class. And it's, if we can make this the reason I want the digital is so that this is so much easier for other faculty to do it. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Kind
absolutely.
of this like application that they just set up on their desktop, and then they implement and they sign their students up through their emails or their C numbers, and they issue the currencies, and they can select their own community partners to work with specifically. And then we can kind of just become a modern money school instead of just a modern money professor.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Allow the history professors and the geography professors and everybody that is engaging in these sort of service and applied learning in the community, which is a growing part of the pedagogy at the university level, right? There's such a demand for students to have real world experience, and they want real world experience. And this is a way to tie some big theoretical concepts to that, and not just have it be go volunteer and here's your points for doing that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. All right, so let's quickly, Virginia, do we have any questions that we should ask while we're at this point here?
Yeah, some people, and I think you've already answered some of them, but we're talking about the weren't even sure at first whether the uni was a type of currency, but you've made that clear. But Christina asked, what's the difference between the uni and Disney bucks or something like that? And I was thinking about Rohan was here talking about the Libra, which is kind of a horrifying concept of privatizing currency. And so why is this different?
So that's a great question. This is different for a lot of reasons. One, it's different because it is emphatically being pursued and anchored in the public sector through public research universities and university systems. So that's one major difference. money is money is money, and we chartalists, we MMTers, understand that it always works through some kind of tax circuit and necessary infrastructure. So in that way, it is like Disney bucks. It's like Starbucks gift cards. Insofar as money always works that way, and credit always works that way. But you then always have to ask the question, well, what scale is this working at, and what kind of power and degree of receivability is the credit that you're working with commanding, right? So, a Disney buck, they don't make those anymore, I don't think. But I remember them when I was a kid going to Disneyland. But yeah, those had really, a really restrictive fiscal tax loop, right? Like, I think maybe you could have spent them like at the Disney stores when they opened them, maybe, right? But like basically it's like all around 1 or 2 or 3 theme parks around the world. Like that's really constricted, and you can't convert them back into dollars because Disney they might have been able to get it, but they didn't seek a swap line with the Fed or Fed liquidity support for their currency, right? But so what we're calling for is a much more robust fiscal tax circuit that includes not just these massive infrastructures that are the public university systems that already own tons of property, that already have all kinds of what we call non-reciprocal obligations, which is just a fancy way of saying a tax, that are already engaging in banking, right? That are already engaging in issuing credit, but they just sell it off and call it debt to private bond investors. So we're talking about these massive institutions starting to create these fiscal tax credit circuits for themselves, and then we're recommending that we make it really robust and really widely receivable by securing local government tax receivability, which basically means, everyone's going to take it. If UCLA implements a UC Uni and gets the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles, which is huge, to say, look, we'll accept this in taxes, that means suddenly everyone's going to feel safe using this, and there's going to be this influx of new liquidity in the middle of a recession or depression, right? So win, 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 and everybody's feeling generous and safe, right? This is like what the MMT world should be like, right? And then like the cherry on top is to say, hey, Fed, come on, do your job. And we're doing some disruptive innovation, right? Do your job and make sure that you've got our back and that the uni it will clear at par with the dollar.
So,
yeah. If our assets start to become non-performing assets like mortgage-backed securities, you'll just take them and put them on your balance sheet, right?
Along with trillions and trillions of other
right?
toxic assets.
So yeah, I think Scott did a great job there of explaining the difference, and it's not that big of a leap either for people to be exchanging in tokens or points or other modes of money, because we're doing it all the time, right? Amazon is issuing credit for spending certain numbers of dollars. Airline miles have been around forever. These are all alternative currency systems, and that if you read about the airline miles, right, those are super restrictive. You may never get your money back. And in fact, they write in the clause, like, there's no guarantee that you will ever get this value. But the university, right, we can, as long as we're open, we can always deliver education. That is what we're promising to deliver. And by spending the uni into the local economy, right, we're aggrandizing our ability to understand not only the economy, but all sorts of other issues that are currently pressing for the public, right? How can we invest and use the uni in order to make the transition from police departments to care workers? How can we make the transition from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy, right? This is the sort of investment that should and really be led by the innovators and the people that are asking and researching these problems at their sources.
So let me ask you this question. If I am, you talked about big data. I mean, I know big data is a huge part of a lot of the digital currency in general. A lot of the move right now is in fact to gather data, but on a more public good version of that data, as opposed to the nefarious marketing version of that data, or worse. What do you seek to gather from knowledge of transactions, being able to trace through various, I'm just curious what you could glean from watching this closed circuit, so to speak, and just seeing the buying patterns and behaviors of people. What is it you would expect to learn from that?
So, is it all right if I take this, Scott?
It's all you.
So if I can share my screen for just a second.
Sure.
I might, so share. So does that work?
Yep.
Yes.
So this is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet right now. Right, so this is the data that they're collecting on what they're absorbing from the financial sector. This is the crisis of '08. And, you know, when this first came out, this was an enormous change in the Fed's balance sheet. This is now. Right, so this is what Neil Kashkari is talking about when he says the Fed has an infinite capacity to address and meet the needs of the financial system and the financial sector.
Ben, could you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here? Because we can't all read the fine print.
So the different colors here, and I think I might be able to make it bigger, maybe. No.
Yeah, some people might be looking at it on a phone, so I don't know how big it would matter. Probably.
So the different colors here. So this is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, and the colors and the size of the graph represent the size and the diversity of what the Federal Reserve has decided to take onto its balance sheet to provide liquidity into the financial sector. And the big purple blob in the middle here, these are mortgage-backed securities, right? So this was an enormous change in Fed policy from the pre-crisis era, which was just basically liquidity, treasury holdings, and over-the-counter lending. Right now, it's all these, you know, different securities, lending, treasuries, liquidity, etc. And this is nice public reporting of the data that gives us kind of a breakdown into where the liquidity is flowing. But what I really see being possible here is more what we've become accustomed to with our tracking of the pandemic, right? So this is the Johns Hopkins reporting at county level nationally of confirmed cases, deaths, etc. So you know, this sort of dashboard is what is possible using, you know, blockchain technology in the Unis system, where we could drill this down not just to county level, but to neighborhood, district, census tract, school district, sorts of levels of geography. And instead of, you know, big red blobs of where people are really sick, the color coding of a uni system could be based on investments in food system, investments in mental health, investments in public infrastructures, right? So we would see the movement and flows of liquidity provisioning in a much different way. This is the sort of reporting and transparency that I think a public first view toward this affords us, right? So one of the things that is, you know, a little bit scary about central bank issued digital currency is that the central bank will always know what you're spending money on and how much money is in your account. And, you know, one of the benefits of that is that in a time like this, the crisis, right? One of the things that the Federal Reserve claims that it's really struggling with is how do we get liquidity directly to the people that need it most quickly? And this sort of decentralized mode of uni provisioning does that, right? It would get money into many more people's hands that need it, that will never see any of the mortgage-backed security liquidity, right? So we can envision a number of different ways of thinking about the privacy rights. I mean, if you're doing collective public works and cooperating with social enterprises, you can make your profile as public, your uni profile as public as you want. You know, like at your local level, right? Or you can make it a county level so that just people within your county know that people are working on these sorts of projects, to start to allow collective action, you know, greater visibility, so that people know that there are others that are doing this work and that they can join these teams and that they can build capacity to solve a particular problem, whether it's food or energy or a social issue. So I think that there's all sorts of ways that you know, the blockchain and the fintech allows us to look at a multitude of data. Additionally, you know, the big thing that we do when we write grants is that we're always assessing and gathering novel data about, you know, our impact. So if we're trying to spend money on changing of the food system, we'll have articulated the measures and the benchmarks and all the things that we're starting with, and whether or not we're making an impact there, right? Have we diversified the food system? Have we made fewer people food insecure? Right? These are verifiable measurables that we don't get ever from a financial report, right? That's just transactions and profits, but this is about measuring and assessing and really valuing much broader financial impact than is ever possible through simple transactional data collection.
It's very interesting.
I just want to say there are a number of questions that are related to the Federal Reserve. And, you know, we recently had Bob Hockett here talking about the kind of unprecedented behavior of the Fed dealing with the regional Fed and communities and states. And could you guys talk, let me just say, it says Jeffrey asked, the only way this would work is if it was backed by the Federal Reserve. How hard is it going to be to implement on a national scale? Jabari asks, would the Federal Reserve buying unis change the dynamic of monetary sovereignty for the federal government? So maybe we'll start with those two.
Okay, so in order for this to work, no, the Fed doesn't even have to be involved at the outset. So that's one answer, because then it would work as a complementary currency. Now, this is why we're suggesting go after the local municipalities who are hurting, ask them, make a deal with them. Hey, make this tax receivable for property taxes, and we'll pay you a bunch of taxes that we never pay you in unis, and it's a win-win situation. So the Federal Reserve doesn't need to be involved at that level. We would like it to be involved just because that's greater receivability. I think our hunch is that if you get, you know, especially a major university or university system on board, and you get local municipalities on board, then the Fed is the easy part. You know, I think if you're like a small public university that's trying to do this and then going right at the Fed, then you're going to get caught in the contemporary restrictions about what the Fed is doing and permitting, and the municipal liquidity facility and its crap interest rates and all this and that. I think what the Fed respects is institutions that are out there creating credit and creating credit systems, and they see it as their mandate to back them up, right? So I think if we go do it, then the Fed will probably follow suit. On the other hand, I think we're all for politicizing the hell out of this Fed, because this Fed is saying, we got infinite money, we can do whatever we want, right? And mostly it's just the rich people and the corporations and financial sector who are lining up at the trough. So, you know, from another point of view, we're saying, yeah, bring it on. You know, we should all be, you know, as one of our subtitles in one of our writings says, storming the Fed, right? Because like that's where liquidity provisioning is happening, because it's certainly not happening fast in Congress. What was the second question about?
Just to give some context there,
Let me just tell him what it is, so you maybe can answer it.
Yeah.
Would the Federal Reserve buying unis change the dynamic of monetary sovereignty for the federal government?
Yeah, I'll think on that. Ben, you go.
Yeah.
So just to give a little context, Cornell, if they paid their property bill in Ithaca, would have been $35 billion in 2009. This is an older article. That would have been half the city's budget. Right? That's enormous, right? So if Cornell said, we're going to give you $10 million in unis, you know, money that would stopgap all of their losses from income based on COVID-19 this year, that would be an enormous jump starter to the local economy. It would save teachers' jobs. It would save firefighters' jobs. It would save Parks and Rec people's jobs. So yeah, I you know, and this is, you know, it's financial innovation, it's credit creation, it's investing in the public rather than, you know, it's a public finance scheme that is mirroring what banks do. So yeah, right now, no, this would fit under state banking laws as a bit license application, or if we had OCC or Office of Comptroller of Currency or something along those lines. There's a few different regulatory spaces in which we can fill this in without the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve is asking for this, right? They are asking for ideas on how to create regulatory regimes for fintech. And we're offering one that solves that problem for them. We're offering one that solves their liquidity provisioning problem, where they can't get money to people fast enough where they need it the most. We're definitely addressing many of the things that Bob is talking about in the community QE writings that he's been doing, and that's certainly influenced the way that I've been thinking about this. You know, regional Federal Reserve is something that I talk about in my, you know, version of his Dirigma sort of approach to jobs guarantee and a Green New Deal. But, you know, the Boston Fed is working with MIT. Why wouldn't the New York Fed work with SUNY, Cornell, and the CUNY system? Why wouldn't the San Francisco Fed work with the UC system, right? All these are natural regional partners that all have extensive existing data about what's going on in their geographies, right? This is why, you know, not just at a micro level geography matters, but at a macro level geography really matters in context. And so, yeah, we could learn a lot, you know, about our different economies and our different scales, and having them not all be dollars, I think it allows us to categorize and just glean that much more data from this. And I think one of the ways that we should be characterizing this is oftentimes people think of complementary currencies as flowing from the bottom up, right? So, you know, one of the ways that people might think of this is, well, let's just pay all the GTAs and the adjuncts in this. And what we would like to propose is that we start at the very top, right? So, you know, admins and provosts and presidents and chancellors that are, you know, offering to take a 10% cut in their salaries, say, well, no, I'm not going to take a 10% cut in my salary. I'm going to take a 25%, but I'm going to gain all that back in unis because I have faith in this process, right? So it kind of becomes we push the dollars down to the people that need the most flexibility in their spending, and we allow the unis to circulate kind of at the top, where people have flexibility to use them more as, you know, a savings device or spending them in restaurants that need them instead of, you know, it's just something that we should think about in terms of pushing the liquidity and the money downward to those that need it most.
Do you want to say something, Steve?
No, no, no. I was just going to try and prompt the question. I guess, and you may be heading this way. The question I had here was, obviously that when you're taking and say, hey, I'll take 25% of my salary and receive that in unis as opposed to U.S. dollars, and you're now adding a layer of, well, if he's in it, gosh, I can be in it too, kind of thing, right? This is the I'm in, you're in, we're all in kind of thing. But it seems like to me the larger question here is, how do you make an average public that has 5 minutes to learn anything? How do you make it? How would you position this so that they would understand why they're taking a discount, or why you follow what I'm saying? Like, to me, there's a miss. I get it, because now I've heard it from you all twice. But I guess my question is, how would you sell this to a person that doesn't have an MMT background, or to a person that couldn't care less about monetary policy, or monetary theory, or anything else? They just want to get paid and they want to eat. How would you make them see this? What would be that pull? I get it's a great pull to say, hey, if the top dog's taking it, then then maybe it's good enough for me too. But I think there's like an interesting delta you guys may already have addressed in your head. I just curious what your take on that was. How would you position that?
I think that there's not one answer to that question. I think it's a fabulous question, and it needs to be addressed in layers and stages. So, if you have an institution and regional governments driving this, it really isn't then a question of, we're so far beyond the reality, the bull that is neoclassical economics, right? Because it's not about individual buy-in. That's not how money works. It's not, do you have faith in this shell? Yeah, I have faith that we both agree that this shell has value. I'm going to trade you, my crap for your crap. That's not how money works, right? Money works because there is an authoritative system that has various sticks and carrots that it's mobilizing, right? And then circulating credit in that way. So I think, if you have the University of California and Los Angeles County saying, like, here comes the credit that you don't have right now, here it is, let's do it. I don't think you even have to understand it, to be honest. I think you can just say, oh, okay, I'm working now, and now I can spend this credit in most of the small businesses around here. And, maybe, I'm told that, like, for this particular credit, I can't spend it on Amazon.com yet. But, right. I mean, one of the things, we had a preliminary meeting with somebody who works in the Tampa Bay, Hillsborough County government before COVID. Ben and I and Rowan, and we were talking about precisely this question. We were talking about creating a local credit system based on the transportation, the bus system, and a new bus card that was being created. And we were talking about the benefits and dangers of calling it something else, right? Not just credits that are, this much in dollars, right? And, we were suggesting that, well, for this community, it's probably better just to say, like, you have this many credits in dollars, right? The same way when you have a Starbucks gift card, you say, I have $10 with Starbucks, right? You don't say I have 10 Starbucks or 10, whatever. They don't have a kooky name for their complementary currency. And I think that's an important lesson. I think that, like, I think in the long run, we want, like, deep MMT democratic money creation pedagogy. So we want to teach everyone MMT through this process. But I think you're right to suggest that, especially in a crisis, and to the average person who doesn't know MMT, this is going to seem bonkers, right? And they're not going to get it. And I just think there are ways to enact this and kind of have a little bit of, like, a front of the house kind of explanation and then allow for sort of deeper levels of engagement and understanding.
Like
Okay.
everything else. So you were going to answer Jabari's question. Would the Federal Reserve buying unis change the dynamic of monetary sovereignty for the federal government?
This is an awesome question.
That's our Jabari.
It's super deep. It's so good. So would it change it? Yes, it would change it. But let me say what, and I could be wrong. I mean, forgive me. But even if I'm wrong, I think this will be instructive. I think that there might be a supposition in that question that is sort of wondering if it lessens the US federal government's monetary sovereignty, if somehow it becomes less powerful. That may have been meant or not. But what my response to that potential question would be is no, it would not. This gets back to MMT and thinking about the whole economy as essentially one consolidated multiple sector system, right? We talk about the fiscal policy and monetary policy, and we talk about basically, right? We understand because of sectoral balances that it's really all just one system, right? And it's just a question of, well, where in the system are you? Is the government, right? Is the public authority? Where in the system is it allowing credit to be created and production to be mobilized, right? So in a certain way, you can just say, well, mobilizing credit and productivity as publicly licensed as a finance franchise through the public university system will just be an expression of the US government's monetary sovereignty. Now, you can also ask another question, which is politics, right? Politics and a kind of collective understanding of money. So this is something we've talked about in-house a little bit. If this gets off the ground and a major system like the Unis or the Sunis or the UCs or whatever get on this, that's going to change that. It's going to change Congress. It's going to change congressional debate because suddenly they're going to see right now they've got, their evil austerity, right? And they control the system by constraining monetary issue. And we only allow it through these horrible private channels through the banking and financial system as supported by the Fed. If suddenly the public sector in regional economies is producing all kinds of meaningful value and saying like, we don't even need you, Congress, we don't have to supplicate ourselves to you, Congress. You can't, be bothered to like meet and take care of the business you need to be taken care of. You don't bother to do your job. Well, we'll just do your job. And, they'll probably be motivated to like start doing their job, probably to get more power back. And that is a real possibility. But I think overall, I would say is it would just be good for US, monetary capacity and would only kind of grow it, right? Rather than take away from it in any way.
Yeah, I think it just much more directly connects the monetary flows to real resources, right? It's real constraint. The financial sector just, is, financial innovation and fintech, one of its objectives is to skirt regulatory boundaries, mostly leverage requirements, so that they can over speculate. And this wouldn't be about speculating at all. This would be about direct investment into direct job creation and knowledge toward, a sustainable, just transition, Green New Deal style.
It's there was like 4 questions and they're all wrapped up in one, and they all kind of come back to this idea. Do you anticipate any pushback? Do you, what issues do you think will come from this? And I guess let me pull that back into the normal fight space that we have even today with the gold bugs and other people that just simply resist fiat and resist not that they have any choice, that they still pay their tax and fiat, but the point is that, what kinds of, pushback might you think you might see in terms of adoption, like from restaurant owners or whatever? I mean, hey, your uni's no good here, or kind of thing. Is this something where it would be mandated by law? Would it be a voluntary acceptance? What would be the carrot and stick of this, if you will?
Well, in the state of New York, it'd be issued under a banking license, the BIT license, which SUNY has a memorandum of understanding and agreement with the state of New York's finance group. So the uni would be bank money. So there would be no reason for anybody to say, no, we don't want your bank money.
That's great.
I mean, nobody, you're swiping a card, the vendor probably wouldn't even know what you're paying in, right? They don't know if you're paying from Apple Pay or Amazon or UBS or US Bank, right? At that point, I don't, the whole pushback thing. I mean, that's no. Right.
I mean, if we get ask the questions, right?
If this is all issued as a virtual currency experiment with a BIT license from the state of New York, then no, this is all of a sudden there's a lot more money and investment in research and public infrastructure than there was before, with the goal of understanding how this financial technology works.
There you go.
And you kill them with kindness, right? Here's this.
Yeah.
Look at all this new tax money.
We're solving problems for the Federal Reserve, for the Treasury, for the federal government, right? How do you get money into people's hands immediately and quickly during times of crisis and any sort of financial sorts of ups and downs? And so, what we're providing is the opportunity for all these regulators to be part of fintech development, right? So they are going to get the front row seat in this technology for, beginning to get a better grasp of what the financial sector is doing.
That is the elevator pitch.
They're not letting them in, right? They are much on the outside and always playing catch up. And what we're offering them, right? One of the innovations that reg tech people are looking for is, creating regulatory software that is tracking transactions in real time in the financial sector. And we can give them that. We say, please, regulate us to the highest degree, and we are going to execute excellent financial services for the public. Right. And we'll dispel all the myths that regulations slow down innovation. We're going to dispel all the myths that regulation makes investments less functional and less reactive and slower. Right. That, this is an opportunity to really change the way that we think about the relationship between the public and money and what regulation and innovation really are.
I love this. That for me, you just sold me. That, I mean, not that I needed to be sold, I was already there, but to me, that pitch right there, now that I see the hook, the real hook, because you get resistance. I mean, you got Republicans trying to outlaw MMT, for God's sake, trying to get a denunciation of MMT even. So anywhere you can find a Republican, or I shouldn't say it like that, anywhere you can find
regulate us, if it works, right, great. And we're not doing anything to the private sector at this point, right? This is contributing.
But aren't you're saying, I mean, Rebecca Rice's question was, what legal philosophical pushback do you see with the uni concept? If you talk about getting money into people's hands, that means the banks aren't doing it. Mm-hmm. So you're taking away somebody's profit, aren't you?
Well, they're going to deposit those unis somewhere, right?
But not credit cards or... I'm okay, never mind.
No. I mean, I think so. It's just not zero sum, right? I mean, it's just like the job guarantee, the job guarantee adds something, and changes the dynamic. We're not denying that. We're not denying that at all. But I do think that, you know, the kind of the very old school kind of, you know, economics and politics pushback that we get from like the gold bugs and the Austrians, like all that stuff when it comes to big government and fiat money that's not grounded by anything, right? Like kind of all that goes out the window when you're just like, nah, this is just fintech, right? We're doing fintech. Everyone else is doing it. We're going to do it at the university. We got this, right? Then it's not, I mean, I don't know, maybe the gold bugs, but who the hell cares about them? But like, I don't know, are the Austrians going to come at us? Like, do they come at the fintech people? No.
You know what? I bet you these, and I expanded upon from Brett, Scott, and your talk with me last time. I suspect the Austrians will sort of like this.
Yeah, it's competition, right? Yeah. Right. And I think we understand this competition differently as MMTers, but
yes.
like you know, you want it to be this like horizontal capitalist little game, like whatever.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's competition, and we're inviting the regulation.
I think this is a great, you know,
it's
way
libertarian
of shunting
it's
all
right.
the bullshit.
I mean, I think it confuses all the politics, which is what it should do.
Yeah, what it should do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then hopefully, I mean, this is what I was saying during our podcast conversation, is like, you know, to me, the big lesson of MMT, and especially that needs to be learned as quickly as possible in this crisis, is that, you know, credit always comes before revenues. Always, right? And when you're in a crisis, you don't need revenues, you need credit, right? Because revenues are always dropping, and that's the end of the circuit. That's not the beginning of the circuit, right? And what issuing unis does is says, oh yeah, we need credit. We need the capacity to either receive credit from a credit issuing institution, or to make our own institutions credit issuing. And, you know, the more and more people understand that, yeah, all bets are off and all the politics change. I mean, you know, to come back to the origin story of how we got going on this from the start of the pandemic, right? So like there's this much longer project that goes back to the Buckaroo and that goes to service learning that Ben's been working on for years, right? But the pandemic specific uni proposal really came out of us seeing our colleagues and peers and even heroes and even outright leftists in academia start protesting and publishing op-eds and open letters and making huge demands. And they were like, yeah, just make the cuts not so bad. Yeah, we're speaking truth to power and we want just some nice austerity. It's going to be nice. Don't be mean. And it's just like, oh my God, right? And because they're so caught in this revenue comes before spending ideology. And MMT blows that out of the water, right? We all know, but the uni does so in a way that's like speaking very specifically to this crisis. And one, I mean, look, there's nodal points of this crisis all over the place, right? But the public university system is one major node, and that's the world we inhabit, right? It's our industry, and we're seeing the people in our industry being like, oh, it's inevitable. There's nothing we can do. No. You know, I mean, yeah. So that's why we brought this project here. But we also think, you know, the lesson is transferable and scalable, right?
Yes, I see that. So one final question, because we are now at the 1.5 hour mark, and I really appreciate y'all's time. The question is, you know, one of credits, and in terms of pooling of data, you know, money pools at the top, so to speak. And is there any controls here? Is there any concern, if you will, of this money pooling or unis pooling or anything like that? What would keep them flowing back to the bottom?
Ben?
Well, that's that's a great question, and I think that's that's the $1 million question. I mean, those are the sorts of things that create intellectual crises, right?
And politics.
Are we really, these self-interested individuals that will just selfishly hoard and, but the investments that we envision through the university system and the uni, right, are for development and science and research and working with social enterprise and working through community labs and things of this nature that are grossly underfunded, right? And very similar to the jobs guarantee sort of structure, right? This would, long term, the uni just builds the pathway toward this sort of big macroeconomic policy, right? It identifies what the jobs are. It identifies what the questions in the science are for the just transition. It identifies the regional, spatial, distributional needs, right? So in many ways, it makes that sort of policy so much more understandable, right? How do you get the normal person to understand this? Well, a jobs guarantee program becomes infinitely more understanding to somebody that just, got their job saved by a uni program that's using the same sort of economic ideas. So I think, that sort of process, how it would pool at the top would, I guess, be the recapitulation of capitalism out of this system somehow. But hopefully what this does, with the reflection pieces that I do in my classes, this sort of process is about cultivating altruism and an understanding of how money can be used for the collective good in a very meaningful way. I think it's such a disservice to call the $600 employment benefits or the payments that we have made to Americans at the beginning of the pandemic sort of bailouts.
Yeah.
Right? These are payments for the sacrifices that we are making, the work that we're doing with our families to keep them safe and to keep those around us safe. And quite frankly, we're all being underpaid for that. Right? We're all being undervalued. And the uni gives us an opportunity to do something that the current neoliberal system doesn't allow, and that's generosity.
Amen.
Right? To cultivate a community and to cultivate a sense of understanding of our role in this place with each other, and to understand that there's not a need to hoard, and there's not a need to be selfish, and there's not a need, because we can build universal public infrastructures, right, of care and compassion and economic activity with great qualities of life. And so that's kind of the long run utopian vision, I guess. But that's my glass half full, sort of. One of the things that I keep pushing Scott on with the aesthetic is, what does this look like? And I think this is what the listeners and people that are engaged and want to push this forward, they need to start telling the stories of what they think this looks like. What does this look like for your kids, when they get married? What does this look like for their grandchildren, that we've stopped, global climate change? Have we been able to accomplish that? Have we been able to end poverty? Have we been able to do really big things? It's time that America, stop thinking so small and start wanting to accomplish together really big things. And this is a stepping stone toward building some confidence toward that. I mean, getting a uni off the ground would be a pretty big thing, but in the grand scheme of things, we've got really big things to get done. I would say.
I think I would just quickly follow up to say, this is the question of, what prevents something from being politically captured by terrible self-interested powers is important. But I think from our point of view, the current situation is already political, right? So, and in no way do we imagine this as a technocratic fix, and the way we're writing about it and publishing about it and starting to speak to some people about it, is through a radical, transformative, democratic framework, not through a technocratic fix framework. Sure, you could go about it as a technocratic fix, but that's not how we're conceiving it. And if it's something that a university union or activist group or some intrepid admin or university leadership, if they want to get involved in this and they want our expertise, then we're going to come to them with our leftist politics and with our communal green vision. So yeah, I mean, there's dangers, but we're not in it for helping some neoliberal technocrats solve some problems.
I'm so sorry that we can't get to everyone's questions. Jeffrey had asked way back at the beginning whether you guys are working with two very good friends of Real Progressives who have both done national outreach calls, Nathan Tankis and or Rowan Gray, regarding this project.
Are we working with? So, I mean, we're all part of the same organization, the Modern Money Network. We started working on this idea for the uni kind of in our back room and kind of coordinated with Nathan. And he, if some people are aware, he wrote a short piece on the uni idea in his Substack. So he's published on it. And then we've kind of taken the lead from there. I think Rowan has kind of come in and out of, active working on the project. I mean, Rowan and Bob were both working on the grant that Ben was putting together a couple of years ago. I think in general, they're working with us. And they also, we consult each other all the time, and we have a wide variety of expertise and blind spots. So, I think we're always asking one another in our organization, can you help me with this? What if this happens? Then what do we do? Oh, well, that I know about that. I mean, I think one of the things that Rowan pointed out kind of early on in this process was that, there's actually like great legal precedent for this sort of thing, that accommodation is usually granted by the legal authorities, if this thing goes to court.
No, this has been fantastic.
I miss Rowan.
Yeah, he just moved.
He used to live here in Ithaca, and he got a job and moved to the West. And so, yeah, I'm sad that I don't have my colleague here to talk to in person. But this is such a rewarding project because of all the things that Scott just said. I mean, collaborative research and collaborative writing and thinking about problems and pushing on new agendas. And, it's just creative and fun and exciting. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic and happy about, to be involved and to be working with such tremendous folks. And to you, Steve, for giving us a space to, kind of real time sort this out with real folks' questions. And I can't wait to try to explain it to my students, and it'll look a lot like this.
Yes, it will.
which is a challenge. I don't know, maybe I can do something with my computer audio so I'm a little bit more octave variant, but there's not much that I can do about that.
You read the same one I read, huh?
Or we could send it to a broken coach.
Hey, Ben, all jokes aside,
I don't read the online ones. I just read the ones that they have to write down on paper and turn in, and those are much stronger. Because they're actually in class, right? They've actually come. So.
Right. There you go. Just as a closing here, I want to thank you all so much for not only the time that you all have put in, but your entire organization, all the Modern Money Network and the GISP fellowship and scholars, and the entire modern monetary theory family, if you will, all of us that enjoy this space and really feel passionate about it. You guys have done some really, really great work. And I appreciate you taking us seriously and coming and spending your time with us. I mean, that means a lot. And, and it shows that you're serious about the work you're doing. And it hopefully our people will feel like, hey, look, the work that we're trying to do as activists and this is important work too, because we're supporting people that are really right on the cutting edge of doing some really cool stuff. So I really appreciate you all letting us into your world as well. And, hopefully we can do something again soon in support of this. And we're open. Just let us know how we can contribute to getting the word out in whatever small way we can do. We're happy to be a part. We want to be a part of it. So I very much, very, very much appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody's time that joined us tonight. I know things are hard for everyone with the, COVID-19 and just life in general, reintegrating even maybe earlier than it should be, watching schools close down the minute they open, watching all kinds of stuff happening has got to be really challenging. And the solutions that these guys brought to us tonight, I mean, this is just one more way of hopefully, making lives better and breaking free of some of the log jams of Congress and other things that prevent us from taking care of one another. And to quote Rosie, let's have a caring economy. I mean, this is a way you do it. And so I just really, really want to thank you all. And with that, Virginia, I'm going to hand it back over to you and let you go ahead and close us out.
Bingo. Yeah, I really want to thank you. You guys have been getting lots and lots of messages in the chat, just thanking you for talking to activists, letting us ask questions. It's certainly a different audience than you're used to, I'm sure. And I want to apologize to some of our attendees that we couldn't get to their questions, but I hope that you learned a lot from this. John, would you put up the card that shows what we're asking for, what we're always looking for at Real Progressives? We need people to work as writers, editors, video editors, all kinds of things. Graphic designers and those who want to learn, writers, journalists, and those who want to learn. Project management with Scrum and Agile, social media warriors, volunteer coordinators, webmasters and content creators, marketing and public relations, editors familiar with AP style and those who want to learn, citizen journalists who can attend newsworthy events and live stream. We need it all. This election is reminding me how we do not have the numbers yet. And that's something that's so exciting about hearing this project, because it has the potential to be so huge. Ben and Scott, it's really encouraging. So I want to thank you two for being here. You're very generous with your time. Between this and the macro and cheese interview, I think we all come away with a really good education about this. And I want to say good night to you guys. Stay safe, take care of yourselves. It's a real pleasure.
That was terrific. Thank you so much for having me.
Truly. Yeah, we really appreciate this whole community, and everyone's got to do their part. I mean, we're all important in this project.
Right. Well, Steve always refers to himself as John the Baptist, bringing the message to the people, introducing us to you and you to us, I guess.
Now, before Ben and Scott go, I want them to hear how I really say it. Okay. I heard Steve on a video. Okay. All of us, the MMT light bulb goes on. Boom. Couple days later, Who do I hear? Fodl. Fodl uses the term a caring economy. Right away, my head and my heart get it. There's no going back.
Here, here.